If you have been around the XRP community for quite some time, then you know about ISO 20022. It is a standard that's been for the longest time talked about, how XRP and HBAR and all of these other tokens are fully compliant with this standard, and it means X, Y, and Z. But I feel like a lot of people don't understand what this standard really means, and they also don't understand that no altcoin is compliant with this standard. In fact, it doesn't matter if they are or not. What really matters is if companies like, for example, in this case, Ripple is utilizing XRP, and if they are compliant, which, by the way, yes, they are. But I think that this standard is still extremely important. I think that this standard is something that everyone should be looking into. And in this video, I want to go over a few things with it. Now, this month is when ISO 20022 really starts to take effect, which we'll also address that as well. But I bring this back up because I did see a post from Charles Hoskinson, and for those that don't know, this is one of the individuals that worked on Ethereum back in the early days. Also, he did create ADA and Cardano, and he did say ISO 20022 support is essential to open banking and combining the TradFi and DeFi worlds. ADA is glad to be holding the line with XRP, HBAR, Algo, and others. And then he shared these two images. So we have here ISO 20022, the new global banking language, what's changing, enriched messaging. This is, pretty much updating that information and data, greater interoperability, simplified connections between networks, infrastructure opportunities as well, automation, faster settlements, compliance. Then we have, of course, who benefits, tokens positioned as banking infrastructure to support modern payments. And then these are all of them. And then also over here, we have another slide, which is what's changing with ISO 20022. Again, we already kind of talked about these tokens mentioned. Again, we already talked about these. Then on the bottom, we have examples of eligibility, and this is focusing on cross-border payments, smart contract capable blockchain, targeted at institutional use cases, all that great stuff. Now, again, this sounds like, it sounds all great on paper, but again, it doesn't really provide us a full-on view of what's really going on here. So first, let's start off with the timeline. Okay, ISO 20022, Swift reposted this back in, I want to say like just October. We have ISO 20022 in bytes for payments 1 month to go. So in this, they do give us the date, right? November 22nd. Are you ready? Then down here, we do have last minute preparations for the end of coexistence, because again, on November 22nd, we are seeing a full-on shift. Here we have ensure that you have tested usage identifier changes that are included in the SR25 upgrade of CBPR plus messages, as old versions will not work after November 22nd. So this is basically the cutoff of that coexistence. And here, of course, we do have the breakdown of exactly what's changing on November 22nd. So here are the 4 elements comprising the changes for payment instructions that will take place on November 22nd. So right off the rip, we have Standards Release 2025. This is MT-FIN. Standards Release, again, ISO 20022 FIN Plus, and this is, again, release notes. And then ISO 20022 End of Coexistence. So the coexistence period for the migration to ISO 20022 of cross-border payment instructions exchanged between financial institutions is scheduled to end on November 22nd. So again, on November 22nd, this is going to start to really shift into, the green light. ISO 20022 is going to start to take over. And already we are starting to reach 60+% of daily ISO 20022 payment instruction messages sent. And this happened in September. So we are getting to the point where ISO 20022 is fully adopted. I do think that it takes a little bit more time for like the entire world to be on this standard, but we are essentially there. Now, again, this is all important because of a few reasons. So I did quote Charles's post on X, and I said that we have been hearing about ISO 20022 compatibility for years now when it comes to XRP, XLM, XDC, HBAR, and the list goes on. Compatibility is and never was the right word to describe what this standard does for certain crypto projects. This standard is extremely important, especially now, to focus on because of a few things. Let me break it down. So right off the rip, this standard has been a thing since 2004, and it's just now being adopted because of the new tech available. And yes, this standard has been around for quite some time, but it really wasn't needed up until the point where we did have the tech available for these big players to actually adopt and utilize new tech. The new tech is now a thing. It mandates all institutions, banks to upgrade their system to accommodate for these new technologies, i.e. crypto. The cutoff is this month, where the coexistence period for Swift's MT and ISO 2022 cross-border payment messages ends. This is one of the big puzzle pieces that's now falling into place at a perfect time, with institutional adoption growing, regulatory advancements, and government acceptance being a reality. With everything happening, especially with the stablecoin boom cycle just starting, this standard can open the institutional floodgates. This will lead to certain crypto projects being adopted and plugged into global financial networks easily, especially for cross-border payments and remittances. I don't think I need to tell you that this is very bullish for Ripple, XRP, and even ROUSD. ISO 2022 isn't just bullish for Ripple and XRP, though. It's bullish for any and all utility-based projects. Now, again, the thing that we really look at here is compliance, right? Do any of these altcoins need compliance? No, because again, it's not like when we think about ISO 2022, this standard doesn't pertain back to, if an altcoin is compliant or not. It pertains back to like banks and institutional players, and if they are following this standard, because again, this is going to affect everything going forward. It's going to improve data. It's going to improve, interconnectivity, all that kind of stuff. Now, I do think one of the best breakdowns of this did come from a, previous Ripple employee, Bob Way. You guys probably know about this post because I brought it up for about roughly, I want to say like 2 years now, because again, it's very important and it really does break it down fully. Big shout to Anderson for this. We have revisiting old comments on ISO 2022 by Bob Way, former Ripple employee, and why ISO 2022 is such a big deal to Ripple, according to him. From his comments, we can derive that its importance lies in it becoming a lot easier to implement Ripple payments since it's ISO 2022 based, with the banks since they're having to upgrade their systems to handle ISO 2022 for cross-border payments, referring to the Swift migration. It will be much easier to sell Ripple software because of this to the banks, according to Bob. Now here we have, I'm not sure I can add a lot of insight. I'm sure things have changed a lot, but just for clarity, ISO 2022 is way bigger than you might think at first. It replaces the previous Swift standards MT and MX and adds a lot of other things. We also have the reason this 2022 transition is extremely helpful to Ripple's bank sales team is this means that every single bank is required to implement new technology. Banks hate to change an already working process. Change can introduce new problems, which means bankers get fired. But also, this is the number one reason most bank integrations don't happen. New system development is expensive and risky. Mistakes can generate bank losses or fines. Bankers get fired. The person you are negotiating with must have product budget, development budget, risk appetite. With a mandatory 2022 change happening, the person you are negotiating with only needs to have product budget. Money for development has already been allocated elsewhere. Nobody gets fired for following a mandate. That makes the sale a much easier lift for Ripple. Now, we also have over here, that being said, bank software sales is still a hard process, especially with the SEC suit. That is already out of the way. But even if banks wait for a settlement, their 2022 upgraded system becomes much easier for Ripple to integrate with them. Now, we also have over here another one. The biggest impact is going to be that even smaller banks are going to be upgrading their systems. That creates a much larger pool of ODL compatible banks. Smaller banks get the most benefit from ODL. It lets them cut the larger correspondent banks out of their flow and cost. And again, this is a part of the second post here from Anderson, which is he's also making comments on FUD from the Ripple versus SEC lawsuit, making bank sales hard. As we know, the ISO 2022 migration will be completed by November 2025 for all Swift-enabled banks, and it should thus be much easier for Ripple to integrate their software with the banks by then. And as we know, the lawsuit is 100% finally done, so this removes two great obstacles for Ripple software being widely used, including Ripple payments. Exciting times. And yeah, it is a very exciting time, especially considering the fact that, it's at a time where we are starting to see everything align perfectly, from institutional grade adoption to government acceptance. Like, again, I want to go back to my post because it's so important to look at the facts here, which is, everything has changed this year. We have institutional adoption happening. We have regulatory advancements. We have major bills getting passed like the Genius Act. Now the Clarity Act is next up. We have government acceptance. I mean, this year is crazy, and it feels as if all of this is planned out and aligned perfectly. Maybe that's just my, mind going to, towards like a tinfoil hat theory, but I feel like almost all of this has been planned for 2025, 2026 for everything to really kind of go live and, align. But also remember, back in May of 2019, there was an update about Swift GPI revolutionizing the world of payments. And within this, we did get a breakdown of settlement on Corda with XRP. They did name both Ripple and XRP within this document as well. And then also over here, we do have get ready for a true transformation with ISO 2022 being at a center point, cyber regulation, FCC, and even EBA clearing. Again, this was back in 2019, and this is from Swift themselves naming both Ripple and XRP being a potential player here that can link towards the Corda settler. Now, again, a lot of things have changed since then, but I bring this up only because Swift is aware of both Ripple and XRP. So, could this be a match made in heaven with ISO 2022 becoming a reality? Sure, it can be, especially considering the fact that Ripple is already connected to a large portion of those banks that Swift does have under their belt, including even Swift as well. And that's through some of their recent acquisitions, like, for example, Hidden Road, right? Which Hidden Road connects to 300 institutional players. So there you right off the rip, you have 300 institutional customers. And then G Treasury, 13,000 banks are connected to G Treasury, which, yes, Ripple acquired them. This is a massive player. And of course, yes, Swift is one of the key players that are tied back to G Treasury, which could easily be integrated into, we could have Ripple and XRP tapped in here with Swift. It would make a lot of sense. We've talked about it in the past, but is that going to be the case? We don't know. But the main thing that we're looking at here isn't so much if, Swift is going to adopt Ripple, or if, Ripple is going to tap into Swift or anything like that. The main thing that we're focused on here is what ISO 2022 means for the space. ISO 2022 itself as a standard allows all of these players, right? The 13,000 connected banks to G Treasury, the 300 institutional players tied back to Hidden Road, all of the players tied back to Medico, which, by the way, I made a list of all of them here. All of these names now have a lot easier, entry into the crypto space. Because again, everything improves from data to interoperability to anything that is needed to connect to crypto. This is at a time where we are seeing the entire space improve. And what I mean by that is we're starting to see all the, obstacles get removed. We're starting to see the guardrails going up through, regulatory advancements. Institutional players are already lining up at the door. We've talked about this all year long. All of these major banks tapping into crypto. Here we have like 7 or 8 posts just regarding that. So again, this is at a time where ISO 2022, the standard that's going to allow for, ease of plug and play essentially with these new technologies, it's happening and it's here and we're counting down the days. It's crazy to think about that. But again, this is a standard that requires all of the big banks to upgrade. What are they upgrading to? Well, tokenization is the biggest thing on the streets. They can't tap into tokenization unless they tap into public blockchains. This standard, in my opinion, is going to really unlock the door. It's going to unlock the door because, again, it makes everything so much easier. All the big banks are now mandated. We are going to see the plug and play process become a reality. We're going to see major adoption here, and it's already starting. We've already started to see the institutional flood on chain through tokenized assets, through stablecoin initiatives, and much more. So ISO 2022, however, it's not a big standard when we think about compliance. Like, no altcoin is compliant with this standard, but it is a standard that's very important to focus on if a company that utilizes a specific asset, in this case, Ripple and XRP, if that company is compliant, which Ripple is compliant, they have been compliant for so long now, that's a huge deal. But I really hate the idea of like people saying, oh, well, XRP is ISO 2022 compliant, so it makes it better than X, Y, and Z in this space. No, XRP is not compliant. Ripple and their infrastructure is compliant. But the compliance side of this standard is not the focus. The focus is what this standard does for the banking space, for the institutional players that want to tap into crypto. It makes it so much easier for them. So this is very bullish for what's happening already around the crypto space. I think that's going to accelerate it and really, put it into overdrive going forward. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.